You're listening to The Wedding Whisperer with Sarah Burton of Simply Love Studio in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm here today with Caitlin Witt, events manager at Castle & Key Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to have you because you are the only distillery in our area that offers weddings on the property now.
Yes, we're very excited about that. We have a very unique property, and being on the Bourbon Trail just kind of heightens that and allows us access to more people. So it's awesome. We're excited.
And Caitlin, before we dive into everything about Castle & Key, let's talk a little bit about you.
Mhm.
I always like for our listeners to know a little bit about the podcast guest. You have been in the events industry for quite some time now. Tell me a little bit about your history in weddings and events.
I have been going on 10 years now of being in events, which is crazy to think about. I started out as an intern at the Hillary J. Boone Center in Lexington, and from there started working as an event coordinator at Spindletop Hall. I was at Spindletop for about 4 years, doing weddings, events, corporate, anything and everything there. Did a short stint at Warrenwood Manor with Brittany and Amber, who are phenomenal, love them. And then ultimately moved over into Castle & Key, started in January of 2020, which was an interesting year. Yeah, and I've been there ever since. I'm going on 5 years now at Castle & Key.
And you are a recent bride yourself.
I am. I got married last year, Sunday, June 2nd. I did a little brunch wedding at Castle & Key Distillery, and it was everything that we wanted. It was perfect.
And I always think it's interesting in our industry to see when vendors get married at their own properties. And I always hear it's very split. You know, it's either I love it very much or I don't want it to feel like work. How did you go about choosing the distillery for yours?
Yeah, it is hard. I think Castle & Key is so special, and although it is work, really truly do love what I do. But Castle & Key is such a beautiful backdrop for a wedding that it was hard to choose another venue. I did explore looking at other venues, but ultimately decided to use Castle & Key. And I also use the property in a way that we don't always get to see it used. And choosing to do it on a Sunday made that a little easier as well.
Let's jump into the history of Castle & Key. I feel like for so long I heard about Castle & Key, and I heard that there were renovations being made. When all of these things were happening, and then all of a sudden it was like, poof, I'm here. And I know it took a couple of years to get events underway there. Walk me a little bit, through the history and kind of where it started probably 10 years ago to where you are now.
Castle & Key, the castle itself dates back to 1887. It's always been a distillery. It obviously sat abandoned for many years. So our owner, Will Arvin, purchased the property back in 2014. It took about 2 years to get the distillery to the point where we were producing spirits. And then it took 2 more years from there, September of 2018, where we actually opened to the public for tours, tastings, really getting people on the property to see it. Prior to my start in January of 2020, we had done a couple weddings out there, and then ultimately realized that we really needed to build that program. So that's why I was hired, was to really build out the event program. We didn't actually start doing events until June of 2021 because of COVID and all the craziness that happened there. But yeah, we hit the ground running in June of 2021, and we did, I believe, if I remember correctly, we did 10 weddings that year, kind of crammed into the later half of that year. And then the next year we booked 27 weddings, and then it's just went up from there. So it's been a journey. It's been a lot of fun though.
For those listening that have heard about the property and they've seen pictures of the property but never actually been there, walk me through whenever they pull into the parking lot, where do they go next?
We have a huge parking lot. So you'll park up there, you'll cross one of the main roads. There is a small gate right in front of the castle that everyone enters into. And then most of the time when we're doing tours or walkthroughs, we meet our clients up at the front gate. But if you're coming on as a normal kind of public guest that is just exploring the property, you'll follow this herringbone path around the front of the building. and it kind of opens up when you come around the side. We have our retail space where we obviously sell our spirits and merchandise. And then we have a bar that you can walk in and grab cocktails. And then in our busy season, we have food trucks out there as well. Since we don't have our own food on the property, we try to provide some food so people don't get too boozed when they're out visiting us.
Then from there, you have, okay, what is it called where like the water is at?
That's the Springhouse. The Springhouse is a natural spring. It's actually the primary reason that the distillery is where it's located. So, way back when Colonel E.H. Taylor purchased the property, obviously the key to spirits is good water. And he was very passionate about that. So, that is one of 5 natural springs on the property, but it is the largest one. And Colonel E.H. Taylor spent a lot of time in Europe prior to coming to America to really build his own distillery. And so you'll notice that the castle, the spring house, the gardens, a lot of those are built on Roman architecture. So he got a lot of his inspiration from architecture over in Europe, which is why when you see certain photos from our weddings or just events in general, it kind of almost feels like you're not in the United States, which is a part of the charm of Castle and
I would agree with that 100%.
Yes.
And so with the spring house, most couples will use that for pictures.
Mhm.
I know it is also kind of a rain plan for like a cocktail hour type. And then it has the lawn right beside it. You may have a special name for that. I'm not sure.
No special name for
Okay.
the lawn, but yeah, the spring house we use as a plan B for our wedding ceremonies. It is an option, but we do utilize it for like you can still do your cocktail hours out there, kind of sometimes based on your guest count. If it is sprinkling a little bit, it's great to be outside still, but covered and everyone can stay dry.
And then you also have the little building where the bar is at, and there are restrooms. You do not have to rent a restroom trailer. They're actually very nice restrooms. They're pretty Instagram worthy, in my opinion, if that's what
Yes.
you're into. And tell me a little bit about the bar that's there.
We call the bar Taylorton Station. Again, back when Colonel E.H. Taylor owned the property and he did his own events out there, there used to be a train that came from downtown Frankfort right through the middle of the distillery. We've obviously paved those roads since then. So that's where the train would stop at the Springhouse. It was a little train depot. So we call that Taylorton Station. We have outfitted that space to now be restrooms. And then the front half of it closest to the Springhouse is a walk-through bar. And it's actually really beautiful inside. And the restrooms have been quoted as the best restrooms on the Bourbon Trail.
I would actually, I mean, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
From there, which I guess I probably should have started at the most common ceremony space. Does that have a name? The lawn, the garden,
The Sunken Garden.
the Sunken Garden?
So the Sunken Garden is actually an exact replica of the gardens at Windsor Castle, which is a really fun fact. Our gardens are maintained by John Karloftis, who's very well known in the Lexington community. He's honestly like a little wizard.
Beautiful.
He's wonderful. It is a stunning, beautiful place. Most of our ceremonies happen in that space. We have a couple different directions that our clients can choose to face, and we allow them to pick that based on their overall vibe for what they want for their wedding. And then we do all the chairs set up for ceremonies.
On a wedding day, so the wedding guests would park, and then is there a way to go straight into the ceremony space, or did they walk along the path all the way around?
We've got a couple options. Once you enter the gate, most of the time we'll send guests directly through, we call it a little secret passage, but there is a side staircase that most guests don't see. You really just get to see this passage if you're a wedding client or attending a wedding. But we will send most people down that way, and it kind of, you go over a little bridge and into the garden. Really does feel like a cool little secret passageway. We do have the option to send guests what we call the long way, which is just around the castle and behind. That is our handicap accessible route, but we also have a golf cart that we use to transport people because it is a decent little walk.
Are there any rules per se on what you have to use the property or the parts of the property for? Like, does the ceremony have to be there, or can cocktail hour be there? How much freedom do the couples have?
Yeah, we give them quite a bit of freedom, actually. We allow them to choose whether their ceremonies in the garden. It can also be at the spring house. We've dabbled in other ideas as well around the property, but for the most part, people choose the garden or the spring house. And then if they were to choose the spring house for their plan A, which we've had a couple people do, We allow them to use the garden as their cocktail hour if they want to. And then we've had some couples opt to just not use the garden. That doesn't typically happen. We have 3 main spaces that they utilize, and we kind of let them utilize those however they want.
And then, of course, I feel like the other popular space is the reception space. I definitely think that has evolved over the past few years, probably as you've been there and you've been doing more weddings.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about the reception space.
So the reception space is called the Shooking Building. Shooking, I always like to give people little details about like why it's called the Shooking Building because it's kind of a weird name. Used to back in the day, that building was used to break down barrels and ship them off to their next home after they had been dumped. And that process of breaking down a barrel is called shooking a barrel. So that's kind of where we get the name for that. Nowadays, it's cheaper to actually just ship barrels whole, so we don't break them down anymore. So now we have this big, huge event space that we utilize smack dab in the middle of production, which has its own fun, unique challenges that we've navigated really well over the years. Shooking is a 4,000 square foot space. We advertise the capacity for that at 175. I have a little bit of wiggle room in there if we need to go up just a bit, but it definitely has evolved. We have a permanent, fully functioning bar in that space now, which is really beautiful. That went in last year. We finalized that right before our first wedding in April. So all of our clients in 2024 got to utilize that space. But it really is a space that can be bare without a lot of florals, if you like, kind of that more rustic exposed brick and wood beams. But we've also had people like really deck it out before too.
And I know I see a lot of like market lights and draping in there. Is any of that included, or is that things that the couples have brought in?
The market lights are always there. We have some ceiling fans, and then there's a big chandelier in the middle that most people recognize. That's all always there. The draping is something that we allow clients to come in and customize for their needs.
And talking about draping, that leads me into like preferred vendors. There are just a few vendors here in town that do draping, but I feel like there are some that do draping at some venues more than others.
Sure.
Do you have a certain list of preferred vendors that you allow at the property or request that your couples use? Is it an open vendor policy? Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah. Our vendor policy has also evolved over the years. A lot of venue coordinators, managers will understand that, you see a lot of things when you do this for a long time. So we do have a preferred list for planners and caterers. So essentially what that means is our couples are required to pick a planner or a caterer on our list, which I will say are very extensive. We have 8 to 10 listed under each one. So we have a lot of variety. That doesn't mean that we don't allow anyone to not work there if they're not on there. We just require that they have their proof of business and their insurance. And then if they're a planner that's never been there or a caterer, I like to do a walkthrough with them so they kind of understand how we're a little different than normal venues because we do have the whole spirit production side of our business, which is really why we're there. And we have to protect that and follow some additional OSHA rules and regulations that not all venues have to follow. And then once we do that, we have them sign a form that says, I agree to all of our rules and regulations. And then from there, if they do a great job, we allow those people to keep coming back. We reevaluate our vendor list every year and add people, take people away. Some people, go out of business every now and then. So we keep that updated. And then after planners and caterers, we do have more of an open vendor policy as we haven't had too many issues with other vendors making or breaking a wedding from our perspective.
And we've talked about this on several other podcasts about the importance of planners and caterers.
Yes.
Because you spend so much money on it. And just like you said, you know who works great at your venue. You know who takes care of the couples and who goes the extra mile. And I know Type A Catering works out there a lot, and Diane knows the property, and she, when she meets with a couple, she knows exactly what they need in the cook's tent and just kind of what they need.
Yes.
Whereas if it's a new caterer, they're not going to know all of that stuff.
Yes, we love Diane so much. Diane has worked with us a ton, and she knows our property so well. We know that when we have her, we don't have to really worry about anything. She really is truly phenomenal. But yeah, and I think the other thing for us is we don't have a catering kitchen. And so we're very transparent about that. We have two options for essentially spaces for them to work within. But most caterers are kind of working from just an empty space. So they really have to bring in warmers and heaters and all the things. And so all of the caterers on our list are very well aware of that. They're okay with it too. Whenever we started to create our catering vendor list, we reached out to the caterers that we had been working with and said, hey, we're putting this list together. We would love for you to be a part of it. Is this something that you want to do? Because it's also important that they want to be there so that the client can have the best experience. So anytime we make any big changes, one of those changes we made last year where we took on all the wedding bars. It was the first year that we could guarantee bourbon to our couples. So we did take on the bars, and we knew that would be maybe not the best thing for all of our caterers because that is a part of their business as well. And we ended up reaching out to every single caterer on our preferred list and said, hey, we wanted to let you know that we're taking on all the bars for the clients. Are you okay to still be on our preferred list? Is that something that you want to be a part of? And honestly, every single person agreed to stay on the list. They wanted to still come out there. So that made us feel better. But just making sure that we're keeping them updated on new things that are happening and changes, I think is important.
100%. And with your bar, do you only serve Castle and Key products?
So we do to an extent.
Okay.
So anything that we produce, we only serve those spirits. So vodka, gin, rye whiskey, bourbon. And then if we ever have anything special that's released, like a wheated bourbon, we do try to hold some of that back for our wedding clients. And those are the only spirits in those categories. Upon request, we will put on a tequila or a rum because although we don't make them, I know those are still big spirits that people enjoy. And so we're happy to put those on there. But we do still also serve beer and wine because everyone needs beer and wine at a wedding. Most of it is local. We actually partnered with Mirror Twin here in Lexington, and we actually have a co-branded can with them. And so those are the beers we put on all of our wedding bars. And then we can also adjust and do some more domestic beers upon request.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
That was a really fun project our food and beverage team worked on last year. We had already been carrying Mirror Twin, but we were kind of like, how can we make this more co-branded to leave it in a can? And so they were really gracious to work with us on that. And that's been a fun project for our food and beverage team.
With your signature drinks, do the couples get to try the signature drinks or test them out before they're like, hey, this is what I want? Do you do any type of tasting with them before the wedding day?
A lot of our couples aren't from here, so sometimes it's a little more challenging. But for those couples that want to, we actually have an option for them to do a custom cocktail. We go about this a couple different ways. His and her cocktails can be picked from our 4 classic cocktails that we already have on there. We also have a whole list of other very classic, well-known Kentucky cocktails that if they want to come out and try, we can whip together for them, let them try them. We also offer this really fun, creative experience where they can create a custom cocktail from scratch with one of our bartenders. There's an additional fee just for the curation of that and the time and energy to put into that. But we've had a couple people who just really love spirits and cocktails or bourbon. And we've allowed our bar team a creative outlet to really enhance a really cool experience for some of our couples that choose to go that route.
And talking about experience, that was literally going to be my next statement. It really is all about the experience for the couple and for the guests.
Absolutely.
And you have the staff on a wedding day to make sure that happens. We were just talking about that and how much you had grown. You said that you have 8 on your event staff now. That is just absolutely incredible.
It is. We have evolved and we have really grown. I started out there with just myself and one girl named Abigail who was wonderful that helped me. And then that evolved into 2 interns. And then I went to my boss and I was like, I don't think I can keep doing all of this like by myself with some interns. And, you know, she essentially said, book enough events that justify having a team. And then that was the year that we booked 27 weddings. And so we slowly started to build this event team. And on a wedding day, we kind of are maybe different than most venues. Other venues might do something similar, but we do kind of a split shift where we have a couple girls that come in the morning and open everything up, make sure the property looks great, set out ceremony chairs. And then we have a second shift that comes in a little later in the evening and really kind of carry everything through the rest of the night and are there until the end. I would say that Our venue is a little different in the sense that most venues have a team outside of the event coordinators that set up all the furniture, do all the flips. And we actually do that internally. And that's what's worked well for our business. And I think that's why I'm able to have such a large team because we're doing more than just booking events, but we're executing them from start to finish and flipping and really owning our event spaces as our own and keeping them kind of top notch in regards to like how we present those to guests.
And that's where it gets tough when you have so many different hands and things, whereas
Mhm.
your team knows everything. They've done those setups before, and it's so
Mhm.
much easier for them. And doing the split shift, as a planner, that planner may be there 18 hours that day.
Yeah.
And having your team come in fresh and just pick up on the venue side makes the world of difference in everyone's experience.
Yeah, and I will say when it comes to like planners and coordinators, we've tried to really cultivate those relationships with them. We never want them to come on site and feel like they're there alone. Like we really do, and I hope that's the experience that we provide, but we want them to know that we're there for them if they need it. And we've had a couple weddings where things got a little dicey and we just jumped in and helped planners because at the end of the day, like we all want these couples weddings to go so wonderfully, and it's a reflection of us as a company as well. And we want everything to always just be very seamless. So we jump in and we help. And I know our property is large and people get their steps in, and we do too. But at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, and that's important to us.
We've talked about that probably on almost every podcast.
Yes.
About how it's so important for vendors to be able to jump in and help each other because we want the couple to have their desired outcome. And that's how you get that sometime is by everyone coming together.
Absolutely. And I feel like I've stressed that to my team just from my experience over the years in the industry is like these people all are your friends, and like help them because you never know when that's going to come back around to you. And, I'm one of the girls on my team is actually getting married next year, and she already knew every vendor that she wanted for everything. She had, cultivated and developed these relationships with vendors, and it made her wedding planning like so much easier because she had these relationships with them and knew these people as people and not just wedding vendors. And I think it's really special when you're on our side and get to go through that. And it's just important to make those relationships.
And if a couple is listening and they are like, this all sounds great, Caitlin sounds amazing, what does it cost?
Sure.
Can we talk a little bit about the fees that are involved with the property for a wedding on a Saturday?
Yeah, for sure. And this actually might be some new knowledge to any vendors who are also listening as well. We did reach out to all of our planners. So starting in 2026, because we're actually already booked for 2025, we have switched to a more dynamic pricing. So we will have peak and off-peak seasons moving into 2026. So in June, September, and October, those are considered our peak wedding months. Our wedding rental fee is going to be $17,000. And then any month not in those three, April through November, will be $15,000 for a Saturday. And then we do have some winter wedding packages that we're kind of starting to dabble in, just to anyone that wants to get married in the winter. We want to try to offer an option for that. And those packages start at $10,000 for our winter weddings. And then we also have micro weddings, which have a maximum capacity of 50 people. It gets you access for 4 hours on the property. Our micro wedding package starts at $7,500. And then we also have an elopement package, and that package starts at $1,500. And that package probably is the one that gets the most customized. People come in wanting one thing and it kind of evolves. So that one is kind of a more custom package that we've been doing it more custom lately.
And if they do a Saturday, do they get a Friday rehearsal or is it just strictly Saturday?
We do allow them to do a Friday rehearsal. The stipulation of we don't book that until 30 days in advance based on our event schedule. So we do still sometimes do events on Fridays that might happen in the garden. That's become really popular. So we'll allow them to do a rehearsal. It just may have to be in the morning or mid-afternoon, sometime before 5 o'clock.
And when I used to do planning, there were times where we didn't do rehearsals and everything went completely fine.
Yes.
And I feel like too, like rehearsals are sometimes when, the bridal party is seeing them, either meeting for the first time or seeing each other for the first time in 6 months. They're chatting. They have no idea that come the next day what they did the night before.
I could not agree more. We actually surprisingly had quite a few couples this past year opt to not do a rehearsal, and everything was perfectly fine. Nothing happened. Everything went on without a hitch. And then we had a couple people who opted to do a rehearsal like that morning or like mid afternoon while they were doing photos. But truly, is when you have a planner, they do everything for you. They tell you when to walk. The biggest thing is just making sure you know where to stand. And most of that is common sense. But we have actually been encouraging people to listen to their coordinators or planners. And if they don't think that you need to do a rehearsal, then again, we'll give them the option to do that because we never want to deny someone that ability to feel more comfortable. But it really is something that's not necessary all the time.
I love when people agree with me. Let's talk a little bit about engagement photos.
Mhm.
We talked about, the fees for having the wedding there, and that can be a little bit out of some people's budgets.
Mhm.
I often hear people wanting to have their engagement photos there. Is that an option?
It is. So we started to get a lot of requests for not just engagement photos, but senior photos and family photos because the property is beautiful, especially in the summertime. So we actually implemented a photography policy to kind of help us navigate how many people we were having out at one time for photos. There is a lot of coordination that goes along with scheduling a photography shoot with the photographer and the families. So we have a photography policy in place. It starts out as a $200 fee, and then we help you kind of coordinate a time with the people coming out for the photo plus the photographer. So we just kind of do those on a as they come through basis. We've actually had some conversations about having like open days where in the summertime, maybe once a month or once every other month, we have a day where it's just open for 2 hours for photographers to come out with their clients and do photos. And that has been very well perceived in the photography world. So we're kind of trying to work on getting one of those together once everything's in full bloom. But yeah, we can do photography sessions. We have put in a stipulation that we don't allow those for anyone under 21. Given the nature of our business and what we do, we never want it to come across as we promote underage drinking. So you do have to be above the age of 21 for a photography shoot.
And they do need to reach out to you or the
Yes.
property and not just show up.
Correct.
I have, couples that, for example, the Kentucky Castle charges a fee, and they typically do not let other brides come on the property in a wedding dress on a Saturday to take photos when they have
Correct.
a bride there. And I would assume that would be the same for you. It's having the respect for other people. And sometimes it's because the property was already booked or whatever, but it's that having the respect. And you can always do a bridal shoot a different day, doing your engagement photos.
Absolutely.
But definitely think about if you were in the other couple's position, just showing up in a wedding dress type situation.
Yeah, and we actually don't if we have a wedding, we actually don't allow photography sessions on those days to be respectful of the bride and the fact that they've paid for the venue. Photography sessions, we actually only allow after hours. So when we're open to the public on a daily basis, which is Wednesday through Sunday, we don't allow photography sessions to happen during those times because not everybody wants to be in the background of people's photos. We're in a time where some people are more private about their life and some people are more public about it. And we try to be respectful and just allow people the opportunity to feel safe on the property and not feel like their photos being taken and blasted everywhere. That may feel dramatic, but I think it adds a level of hospitality and thoughtfulness that we provide.
Talking about you being there since January 2020 and the
Mhm.
property evolving, you now offer several Airbnbs.
We do. So over the last few years, we actually have 3 Airbnbs that are owned. A couple of them are owned by Castle and Key, a couple by our owner separately, but we call it the Field House, which is an Airbnb that's at the top of Duncan right off 60. It sleeps 10 people. A lot of our wedding clients opt to rent that house on the weekend of their wedding. And we have someone that manages that. So essentially, once our couples say, like, hey, we would love to rent one of the Airbnbs, we put them in contact with our property manager. But we've got one at the top of the hill. We have one in downtown Frankfort called the Stone House, which actually kind of replicates the stone of the castle, which is really cool. And then we have another one out in for sales.
So you have those properties, and I know a lot of times the couple may stay at one of those, the
Mhm.
bridal party may stay there. Sometimes that gets shuffled around a little bit on the night of the wedding. But you also have a lot of couples that will do room blocks in downtown Lexington, like the Hilton 21C.
Absolutely.
They'll have Gold Shield do buses out
Mhm.
to the property. How many, like percentage wise, do you think offer transportation from their hotel out there?
I would say 80 to 90% of our
Really? Okay.
couples offer transportation. Castle and Key is kind of a little far out. The road that you take to get down there is a little windy, but I always highly encourage our couples, if it's in their budget, to provide transportation. Given the fact that we are a distillery and there's going to be an open bar, and the road is windy and it's dark down there in the little valley that we sit in, I always recommend it if they can. I wouldn't say every single couple offers transportation, but actually we have a good amount of people that will offer transportation from downtown Lexington or whatever hotel they're at to Frankfort and back. And it really does make the world of difference if that's within your budget.
And it's so funny when people talk about, like, curvy and windy roads. Being from a small town,
I know.
that has literally never crossed my mind. It's just a normal road to me, but I can
Yes.
see how that would very much be hard for someone that is not used to that.
Yes, I also grew up in a small town, and windy roads were like an everyday occurrence. And so for me, I'm like, oh, I kind of feel like I'm back at home a little
Same,
bit.
yes.
But for some people, they're like shocked when they come down Duncan. They're like, oh my gosh, it's so small and windy. And I'm like, it's actually a lot bigger than it used to be. So,
And two, you have a lot of out of town couples and a lot of out of town guests that have
Mhm.
flown into either Louisville or Lexington.
Yep.
So really providing transportation for them and the groups is preferred by them.
I would agree. And especially when you have a lot of out of town guests, they don't really know what to do or where to go. And providing that transportation, it really just adds a level of hospitality on your part as a couple for the guests. It's nice, and they don't have to worry about anything, and they can really enjoy the evening.
I did a podcast with Trish Allen. She had two daughters that got married in 2023,
Mhm.
and one of them got married at a venue probably about 45 minutes outside of Lexington. And she said that one thing they wish they had have done was provide transportation.
Mhm.
She said she felt like people started getting antsy and nervous about the roads and that they
Yes.
just felt like they needed to leave because they were just nervous. And so add in an open bar and a distillery, transportation, if you can fit it in there, 100%.
Yes, I could not agree more.
You mentioned that you are on the Bourbon Trail,
Mhm.
and I know we have a lot of out of town couples that come here strictly for Bourbon Trail.
Yeah.
People are always amazed by that, and to me, it's so normal at this point.
Yes.
But if someone is coming in just for bourbon and they want to send their guest on a tour,
Mhm.
what do you do for your tours there?
Yeah. So typically early on, 6 months out or so, when we kind of touch base with all of our brides, I always recommend that they add our website, like the tour page of our website, to their wedding website and encourage their guests to book a tour with us. That's really fun for them if they can come out and know the history or see the property before the wedding. I've noticed people really enjoy that. So that's one way to do it. We also have a little secret time slot, if you will, for all of our wedding couples that we kind of reserve that for them on Fridays, where they can either send specific people from that are like coming into town, family members, or the bridal party themselves, where we'll do a tour for them as part of their wedding package. Not everyone takes us up on it, but some people do. So that's also an option. And then we've had really large weddings before, just block out full days or half days for tours that their people that are coming in can sign up for. And so that's also an option. And we essentially just do a buyout for however many tours that they would like to pay for or however many guests they have. And then their guests can come throughout the day at an assigned time and go on the tour prior to the wedding. And we've also done it on a Sunday before, offered the same thing.
And
So
I,
lots of options.
and I will say, if you have not been to the property before and you're even local, you need to go and just look at it, do a tour of it. And honestly, your gift shop is amazing.
It is. I cannot say enough wonderful things about our retail manager and buyer. Like her name's Tommy Wilson, and she is phenomenal. It really doesn't feel like any other retail space on the Bourbon Trail. I've visited a couple of them with her as well, but the property is stunning. It's not like you have to come out and stand in line and go through a tour and then leave. Like the property is open. There's a ton of seating. Our experience manager has done a phenomenal job of adding additional seating to the property over the last year and a half. So we have seating on the patio outside of the boiler room. People can hang out, have lunch. We have a lot of local people in Frankfort that come out for lunch during the week, or they'll bring, we allow people to pack snacks if they want to, or like bring their own little picnic lunch since we don't have food on the property. And yeah, they'll grab a cocktail and have lunch. And there's just tons of seating, tons of space. And we really encourage people to come out and just enjoy the property, especially when it's sunny and beautiful out.
Will you have your music series this summer?
We will. So the Springhouse music series will come back in May. So that will start in May. We're actually doing that twice a month this year. So previously, it's always been the first or second Wednesday of every month. We're doing that the second and fourth Wednesday of every month, May through September this year. The biggest request that we got last year was we want more of these. So we've bumped that up to twice a month and have some really cool bands coming out this year. And we should actually be releasing that schedule pretty soon.
And that's something fun for local people to do. And even if you have guests in from out of town coming in for your wedding, it's such a great event.
Yes.
Super relaxed. Like you said, you had the food trucks and just all kinds of fun stuff. Talking about releasing that this year, do you have any other future plans for events or maybe renovations that you're doing for weddings that you could share with us today?
Yeah. So to the 3 spaces that we already offer for the weddings, we don't have any major renovations happening to any of those spaces. We are getting ready to launch a new space a little later this year. It's called the Warehouse A Ruins. We actually tested out this new event space with Garden and Gun. We did a really fun event with them earlier last year. So we were getting it a little bit more public ready, but we want to start kind of doing more events. I think the space is going to evolve into more like rehearsal dinner type spaces, corporate meetings, things like that. It's more of a industrial part of our property. So you have this like stunning ruins of Warehouse A, but kind of nestled within this like more industrial part. So it's a really cool feel. It's a cool space. We're excited to launch it and really start to try to do more events there. And then we are hoping that a little later this year, probably, I have a feeling it's probably going to be more into 2026, but we are hoping to get a couple more of the like rundown and abandoned spaces up and running for like more event, private tasting, single barrel selection spaces. So we've got a really cool superintendent's cottage behind the Springhouse that we're hoping to have live by the end of this year.
Is the restaurant, The Stave, still open?
It is.
Okay.
Yes. The Stave is in between us and Woodford, and we send everyone to the Stave for lunch. It's phenomenal.
I did a tour at Buffalo Trace, and that was where we did lunch.
Yes.
It was absolutely 10 out of 10. I was honestly stunned that it was so good, and it was just out in the middle of nowhere.
It literally is, and they are the nicest people. They have amazing food. And they sell really good Castle and Key cocktails there too. So they're actually one of our best sellers, which is really fun.
That's awesome. So that's another great place. If they are having rehearsal, they could do rehearsal dinner there.
Yeah. And the Stave actually has a really cool space that sits right on the river behind them, or the creek, I guess. And they rent it out for like events, kind of like rehearsal dinners, or really however you want to utilize the space. So they have a really cool space out there too.
I know you said that you were booked for 2025. I'm guessing that's all Saturdays are booked. Are you open to any micro weddings or elopements like during the week for 2025, or are those booked as well?
No, we're definitely open during the week. Typically, we mainly do corporate during the week, but every now and then we'll get a micro wedding or an elopement that maybe snags a Thursday or a Friday. So we're definitely open to micro weddings and elopements still for 2025. The last I checked, we have one Saturday left in 2025 in July. So if anyone's interested, snag that date. But yeah, we have one Saturday left in July.
I know that you have 2 separate Instagrams. If a couple wants to look at some more photos, you've got Castle and Key Distillery, or is it just Castle and Key?
We have one Instagram is Castle and Key, and that is our spirits focused Instagram. So most of the things that'll be posted on there are more product spirits focused. And then we have our Castle and Key Weddings Instagram, which is obviously all about weddings. And then every now and then we'll post more like corporate type stuff, like on our stories for that one. But we're kind of hoping to utilize our newsletter this year to kind of do some more corporate event promotions.
And two, I always recommend that the couples look at the tagged photos on venues because there's such great content there that you're probably never even going to have the time to post, but the photographers or the couples have tagged the venue in.
Yes. And I will say we have one of the girls on my team, her name's Mary Kate. She's wonderful. She's really owned the Castle and Key Weddings page this year. She's done a phenomenal job of posting content. She's also made some highlight reels to show all the different spaces and like different ways you can utilize them. So we've really tried to make the Instagram a space where couples can find ideas, but also say like, hey, I'm getting married facing the castle and here's all the different weddings we've had that do that, just to inspire them, give them ideas. We can always also pull from our archive if people need more.
Well, tell her I said thank you for that.
Yes.
Because when couples come to me, they're like, I tried to look at the venue on Instagram, but they only had pictures of the couple. And they're like, that does me no good. And I'm like, I completely agree. So that is amazing that she has taken the time to do that because that makes a huge difference.
We tried to be very thoughtful with the Instagram so that it was a tool and not just a place to post pretty pictures. So you will find either in the feed or in the highlight reel any way that you can set up a ceremony on property, even the Plan Bs in the Springhouse. We've made sure to put photos up of all of that. And if anyone can't ever find anything, let us know. But I think we've covered almost everything on there.
Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it so much. And if someone wants to reach out to you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah. So if you're looking to inquire, we try to direct everyone to the website. And you can go to the events page on there and inquire for a corporate event, a wedding, micro wedding, photo shoot, whatever you're looking for, you can inquire on there. You can also reach out to our events account. So it's events@castleandkey.com. And whoever your email kind of pertains to, since we have such a big team, we have certain people in charge of responding to certain things. But we try to get back to everyone within 48 hours during busy season, be a little more precious with our time, but we try to get back to everyone as quickly as possible because we know that's important too.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin.
Of course. Thank you.